So we've been talking about wisdom and how Proverbs imparts wisdom to our lives, and we talked about last week in the first chapter of Proverbs how that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We talked about the idea of that fear, that fear means to have an awe and respect of God. Fear also gives us an understanding of our accountability before God, the way we live our lives. And I think about what Scripture says in the New Testament. It says, teach us to live our lives wisely because the days are evil. And I want to start off with sharing a statistic with y'all. I'm always reminding us that conversations can lead to life change. I have been reminded of how simple conversations and invitations can be encouraging to people. I want to encourage you first, make sure you keep one of these bags with you. We keep these bags here and in the foyer. In that bag, there are some invite cards to the church, and there are also some little gospel tracts. What's my purpose? Help people, lead people to Jesus. Just as a reminder and encouragement, there's a young lady that's been coming to our church that me and Melissa had an opportunity. We ate at a restaurant, handed her one of these, invited her to church, and she's been coming. It's just a reminder to me to be diligent in that. What I do, I'm forgetful. I have to be reminded as much as anybody to be doing this consistently. So I keep one of these bags laying on the front seat of my truck. Because if I don't, I'll forget. And I always try to grab a couple when I go in restaurants or other places. So let me encourage you to use that resource. Also, as we're getting ready for Friend Day, we've got these. We didn't come up with this. I stole it. Preachers steal stuff that's useful, right? There's nothing new under the sun, Solomon said. But it's just a little prayer card. Let me encourage you to take one of these. And it's got a place where you can write the names of people and be praying for them as we come up to Friend Day. And be thinking about how you can invite them, encourage them for that. And also, this is something I put together a while back. It's how to be a person of spiritual impact. It uses the acrostic impact. That to spiritually impact people's lives, we have to be interested in their spiritual life. Have to be motivated by the power of gospel, pray for the people, be active in their lives, be conscious of opportunities to share Christ, and trust that God will use you to lead others to Christ. So you might want to grab one of those. Just look at that, be reminded that God can use your life and wants to use your life to see people's lives change. Now let me share with you a statistic. I may have mentioned some of this in passing, but it was refreshed in my mind. I still get our director of missions, who was in the Chattahoochee Baptist Association in North Georgia, good friend, mentor to me. I still get his emails. And he sent out statistics from the association, the numbers from last year. About 75 Baptist churches in that association. The population of Hall County is about 200,000 people. Y'all know one of the reasons I like living down here, there's not as many people. Those 75 churches altogether in 2023, on any Sunday, the average attendance in all those 75 churches together was about 15,000 people. 2019, before COVID, the average was about 16,000 and something. So that's roughly about 7.5% of the population of Hall County that are in a Southern Baptist church on any given Sunday. 7.5%. Now, there are other good evangelical churches in Hall County. I would say if you put all the evangelical churches together, Methodist and others, that percentage may double. But here's the interesting thing. That's about the same percentage of Tift County. In our county, our Male Baptist Association, we've got 27 churches. The average attendance in all those churches each Sunday last year was about 3,200 people, which is about 7.5% of the 50,000 people. Now that ought to break our heart, that on any Sunday, only about 7 to 8% of everyone in Tift County is in a Baptist church, hearing the gospel, being discipled, and growing. And so that reminds us how important that is. I'm just constantly reminded that what if each one of us just reached one person this year? What if each one of those 3,200 people that are active in church reached one person? The percentage goes from 7.5 to 8 to 16. And if we did that every year, just think of the impact of that. So I just want to share that with you because a big part of living in wisdom is just understanding the spiritual climate we're living in and saying, God, I don't know about y'all, I find myself complaining about a lot when I watch the news. Anybody do that? You don't have to raise your hand and admit it. I know we all do. But then I get convicted. I'm like, well, I do a lot of complaining, but I'm reminded that the church is God's answer to the problems of society because it's through the church that the gospel goes out and changes lives. So just want to encourage you with that. So what I want to talk about tonight, what we're going to do over the next several weeks, we're just going to go to the book of Proverbs and we're going to look at several topics that are very pertinent to our life. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. And we're going to just see some verses and see how Proverbs helps us to live through those things and in those things with wisdom. So what I want to talk about tonight is just some things Proverbs says about relationships. And I made this statement here. Relationships can bring us the greatest joy in life or cause us the deepest pain. Let me ask you, is that a true statement? You just think about your life. Think about some of the happiest times that you've ever had. I guarantee you other people were involved. Right? I mean, I think about one of the happiest days of my life when Melissa married me. I hope it was one of the happiest days of her life too. She might have mixed feelings. But you think about it. Think about the times that you'd say, that was one of the greatest days of my life. I guarantee you people were involved. But now, on the other end of that, if we think about some of the worst days of our life, it probably had to do with relationships. It could have been a breakup. It could have been a breakup of a friendship or a relationship. And so, you know, as I got to thinking about that and thinking about what Proverbs says about relationships, this is something I've realized over the years of studying the Bible. The primary theme of the Bible is God's glory through the redemption of mankind, right? We looked at that last semester when we talked about where we even got the Bible. But you know what I believe the second greatest theme of the Bible is as we look at it? Is the maintenance and restoration of relationships. Think about what you know about the Bible. It's about maintaining and restoring our relationship with God. It's about maintaining and restoring our relationship with other people. You go to Genesis and Exodus. What is God doing? He's paving the way for restoring His relationship with man that had rebelled against Him. If you look at the nation of Israel, if you look at the Ten Commandments, if you look at the laws God instituted, think about it. The first 5 Ten Commandments speak about what? Our vertical relationship with God. Don't curse His name. Don't have idols. Don't worship anything but God. And what are the other commandments about? Our horizontal relationships. Don't steal from people. Don't steal other people's spouses. Don't covet what they have. Don't be jealous. Don't take their life. That's a pretty good idea for maintaining relationships, right? And then you go to the prophets. You know, it's about maintaining relationships among one another, caring for the poor, caring for other people in our life, maintaining a relationship with God by not worshiping idols. You go to the Gospels. What's the 2 main things Jesus talked about? Relationship with God. I came to seek and save that which was lost. I came to restore that relationship with Him. But a lot of what Jesus talked about was what? Our relationships among one another. Look at the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That's our relationship with God. You know, blessed are the meek. They'll inherit the earth. You know, the way we care about other people, put other people second or first. So much of what Jesus says, He says, you know, in Matthew, He tells us how to deal with conflicts. He said, if you got something against another person, don't put it on social media. What did He say? Go to that person first, sit down and talk with them. I believe 95% of relationship problems in marriages and in friendships and in churches could be solved with 2 people sitting down lovingly and calmly and talking it out. And He says, you know, if you don't, get some people involved, fix that relationship. I think another place we see that is in the epistles that Paul wrote specifically. Have you ever noticed Paul's epistles, how they're laid out? He will take the first half of a letter and he'll talk about doctrine and theology. This is what Jesus Christ has done through us. This is what God has done for us through Jesus Christ. He's redeemed us, He's restored us. And then what does he talk about? He talks about relationships among believers. He talks about relationships in marriage. So the Bible, second to a book about the glory of God, is relationships, because that's what life is made of. And so I want us to just think a little bit tonight about what the book of Proverbs speaks about relationships. Now, when I say relationships, what I'm talking about is friendships. We could talk later about what the Bible says about marriage. You know, it says things, the book of Proverbs says things like it's better to live on top of your roof than inside the house with a nagging wife. You know? So basically what it says in marriage, the best way to handle the relationship is, guys, just hush and get out of the way, okay? You know, better to go out in the desert, you know, and that kind of stuff. But seriously, it does speak to intimate, close relationships. But what I want us to think about tonight is just the friendships we have. Because I believe that one of the things that Christ calls us to as Christians is not just simply having friendships, but having what I call redemptive friendships. That is, being intentional about our friendships, that really, I believe as a Christian, our friendships ought to have one of two purposes. It ought to be, number one, to lead somebody to Jesus, or number two, it ought to be able to help them grow in Jesus Christ. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about what Paul said in 1 Corinthians. And, you know, I think in my early history of being a Christian, and really the church culture I grew up in, the thought was, well, as a Christian, you know, stay away from all the bad people. Anybody kind of get that when you were growing up? There was, unfortunately, some legalism. We were talking about evangelism. We were talking about how really the message I heard growing up in the church was keep lost people at arm's length unless you're going to knock on their door, tell them they're a sinner and going to hell if they don't believe in Jesus. In fact, I read an article last night that talked about how there's really been a shift in evangelism, especially in the South, because people don't have a familiarity with Jesus, and just walking up to somebody and getting in their face and saying, you're going to die and go to hell if you're not a Christian like me and put your faith in Jesus, that's more of a turnoff. And I think there was a time when, as Christians, we felt, okay, you know, the best way to be holy and close to Jesus is to be, you know, arm's length from lost people. But the more I've studied Scripture and the more I study the life of Jesus, what did Jesus do? He came close to lost people. He was criticized for being a friend of sinners. And so when we think about true friendships, Paul in 1 Corinthians, it's interesting what he said to the church. If you remember the story there, was it chapter 5, where there was a young man in the church at Ephesus who was having a physical relationship with his stepmother. Sounds like a Maury Povich episode. And the people in the church, the Christians, knew it was going on, but they didn't say anything about it. The guy was still coming to church and maybe singing in the choir or doing all this stuff, and the church had not addressed his sin to him. And Paul said, look, if this guy, if you're not approaching him about it and he's not repenting, what you need to do, you need to discipline him. You need to, he literally said, push him out of the fellowship. I found it interesting in the history of my experience again with church. We vote people into the church, but we never discipline them out of the church. And I can even remember growing up, hearing rumors about people in the church and the things they were doing and just getting away with it. But here's what's interesting. Paul says after that, he says, distance yourself from that brother. Turn him over to Satan that he might repent. Now, what's interesting, later in one of Paul's letters, he makes a reference to a man who had been restored, and we believe that could possibly be the same guy. That when he was kicked out of the fellowship of the church and the Christians said, okay, we're not going to hang out with you, we're not going to accept you the way you are, we're not going to, just let you live without accountability. What happened when he was away from the body of Christ and he understood the loss he had, he came back to repentance. But there's an interesting thing Paul says. He says, I'm not telling you to disassociate with the world. Now, doesn't that seem counterintuitive? He said, okay, if there's a brother and sister in Christ who's living like the world and they won't repent, hey, don't go out to dinner with them. Don't hang out with them unless you're doing it specifically to try to win them back. He said, but be friends with lost people. And so let's think about this idea of friendship, not only among one another, but let's think about how Christ wants to use us to be a friend to people who do not know Him. So, first of all, let's just think about what is true friendship. I think friend is a word that gets thrown around a lot today, and we maybe have lost the meaning of it. There are a lot of words today that get thrown around that really do not have the depth of meaning that they used to have. In Proverbs 17:17, Solomon says this statement, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a difficult time. Now, let me ask you a question. How many friends does a person have in a lifetime? Well, what would you say? How many friends does a person have in a lifetime?
Well, I've heard it said if you have 5, you've done well.
Yep. We call that 2 a.m. friends. Or how many 2 a.m. friends? That's the kind of friend you know, if you called them and woke them up at 2 a.m., no matter what you told them, no matter what you had done, no matter how your bail may be, that they're gonna say, hey, I'm there for you, and they're going to be there. I can think about in my life, I may have had 4 or 5 people, may have 4 or 5 people in my life like that. Now, I know I call my wife and say, hey, you got to come to jail and get me out. She's going to say, hey, you can stay there till the morning. But I may have had 3 or 4 friends that would do that. Listen to some of these. Somebody actually did a study of this, and I thought it was very interesting. How many friends do adults have? Turns out 16. The average American has 3 friends for life. 5 people this is funny, 5 people they really like and would hang out with one-on-one. And 8 people they like but don't spend time with one-on-one or seek out. That was an article that was on Fox News several years ago. Someone classified the types of relationships we have. Acquaintances, that's just people we know their name. When we see them, we say, hey. We might see them out in town. You know, it might be somebody that works in the other department or the other hallway or something. We have casual friends. That's people that we consider friends that we see in a social setting. I think in church life, we have some close church friends. We have casual church friends. We see them on Sunday morning. Hey, you know, see them out in public. May do group activities with some of them. The next one is close friends. That's friends that we spend more time with. May be in our home. We may be in their home. We may feel able to call and talk about things. But then the smallest category is intimate friends. That's the friend you know that you can talk to about anything. The friend that's going to be there. The friend that's not going to judge you. The friend that's going to love you, like the Bible says, like Proverbs says, a friend loves at all times. Another study I found in Psychology Today said, research suggests that the number of close friends we need to feel that we have enough is somewhere between 3 and 5. That if you have 3 or 5 really good friends, you feel like you've got a good friend group. Not only that, but adults with 4 or 5 friends enjoy the highest levels of life satisfaction, and those with 3 close friends are not far behind. And so I found that to be very interesting, what even psychology speaks about friendship. And so the wisdom of Proverbs teaches us not only what a true friend is, but the characteristics of true friendship. Now think about what he says. A friend what? Loves. Now think about it. What do people base friendships on? You ever seen people at a ball game become like instant friends because they're rooting for the same team? You know what's crazy to me? You take 2 grown macho men, they won't hug another man in church, they won't cry in church, but you let them go to a Falcons or a Georgia Bulldog game, they'll hug the sweaty stranger behind them and high-five each other and act like they've known each other for life. You know, I think we need more hugging and high-fiving in church. I want to see y'all on Sunday morning. When I make a good point, I want y'all to high-five each other. You know? But isn't that crazy? Think about even how we refer to friends. But notice what the Bible says about a biblical friend. A friend loves. Now we know that the New Testament word for love is, the biggest one we use is agape. That is a selfless, sacrificial, hey, I'll do whatever I can for you. It's not about me, it's about you. It's the love Jesus expressed on the cross. That He was willing to die on a cross. You know what to me is so amazing about the gospel? I believe in the foreknowledge of God. I believe that God, before Jesus died on the cross, knew every person who would receive Him by faith and be saved. It not only amazes me that Jesus died on the cross for me to save me, knowing I would put my faith in Him, but I think beyond that, it's that Jesus would die on the cross the way He did for millions and millions of people who will reject Him into eternity. But He still suffered for them. And the Bible says He was a friend of sinner He loved. Well, this Old Testament word for love here, the Hebrew word, it's used in other places in the Old Testament. It refers to God's love for us. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 10 there. I put on your notes. But showing faithful love, it's speaking of God, showing faithful love to what? 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. I don't know if you have a Bible app or a Bible software or website you use. Go and look how many times in the Old Testament, especially in Psalms, the psalmist speaks about God's faithful love. And oftentimes, it's in reference to the fact that even when I do this, God still faithfully loves me. That He doesn't stop loving me. It's also used for the love of a parent for a child. So, this wisdom says true friendship is that kind of love. That as a true friend, I'm going to love you faithfully as God loves you. I'm going to love you selflessly as God loves us. I'm going to love you compassionately and with empathy like a parent loves a child. Listen, I know there were a lot of times in my life, my parents probably didn't like me. We were sitting here at dinner a minute ago and somebody was talking about their teenage son. And I said, I don't know anything about that. I was the perfect son. Not really. I was, and that's why I said something about it. Melissa said, I said, well, you know, I never had sons. I don't even know anything about that. She said, well, Stacy, I remember when you were a teenager. So you were a teenage boy. But think about it. You know, there is something, when our daughters were born, I think it helped me take great strides to understanding deeper the love of God. I've told my daughters, I said, there will never be anything you could ever do where I would stop loving you. If my daughters, one of them was commit a heinous crime and be sentenced to prison for life, it would not change the way I love them. Now, would I be disappointed? Yes. I'd be disappointed in the effect it has on their life. Same way with God. God loves us infinitely. Does our sin disappoint Him? Yes, because it offends Him. It hurts us. But, you know, that's the idea, that a true biblical friend that builds that relationship on biblical wisdom is a friend that says, you may disappoint me by your actions, but I'm going to love you regardless. And you may let me down, and you may treat me wrong, but I'm going to love you unconditionally. I'm going to love you faithfully. So, true biblical friendship here in Proverbs, and I get the idea that one of the reasons Solomon is telling his sons this is, hey, pick your friends wisely. Do you remember one of the young men, when Solomon died, who didn't pick his friends wisely? Was it Rehoboam or Jeroboam? One of them was trying to be the king. One of them was going to be the king. And he met with some wise older men. And he said, how can I be a great king? And they said, now look, your dad taxed us heavily. He oppressed the people with those taxes and stuff. If you want the people to love you, if you want to be a great king, loosen the taxes, lighten up on them. But then he wanted to get some other advice, and he went to his young friends. And they said, oh, whatever your dad did, do more. And so he taxed them heavier. And that's what split the nation of Israel into the 10 northern tribes and the 2 southern tribes. They said, hey, forget you. Another man was their king, and they went on. And so I believe what Solomon really is teaching here to his sons, and the Holy Spirit's teaching to us, is pick our friends wisely. Pick our friends who are going to love us faithfully, seek the best for us, love us like a parent does a child, or like God does us. And let me just ask you to think a minute. Do you have friends like that? And more importantly, are you that kind of friend to other people? Because I think that's what epitomizes what a Christian friend truly is. Second, not only is biblical friendship based on love, it's consistent. Look at what he says. A friend loves what? Sometimes, when it's convenient. What does it say? All times. Now, if you look up the depth of that Hebrew phrase, you know what it means? All the time. Now, have you ever had a fair weather or self-seeking friend? I'm sure all of us have. You know, hey, you want to know how many friends you have? Win the lottery. You'll even find family members you never knew you had. I saw a clip of a show the other day, and they were talking about like 2/3 of people who win the lottery go broke within a couple of years. And one of the problems is, all of a sudden, they've got all these people with their hand out. And they just giving out money. I love these little pictures people put on the internet. And sometimes you'll see these pictures say, if I win the lottery, I won't tell nobody, but there'll be signs. And it got Soldier's Yard with like 12 Corvettes in it. You know? So if I ever win the lottery, I'm not telling y'all, but there will be signs. There'll be like, 12 motorcycles in the yard, a couple fishing boats, I'll also tithe to the church. Somebody asked me one time, says, if a person wins the lottery, would you accept their tithe to the church? I said, absolutely, we'll take the devil's money too. So, anyway. But we have all had those people in our life who we thought were a friend when we were doing something for them. We thought were a friend when everything was going great in our life. But maybe when we stopped doing the things they were doing, maybe when we stopped giving to them, buying them lunch, doing all that stuff, maybe when we sought something beneficial out of the relationship, what did they do? They cut it off. I'm sure we've all had people like that. But a true biblical friend says, I'm going to love you when you're doing something for me and when you can't do a thing for me. A true friend says, I'm going to love you when you're treating me kindly, but I'm going to love you even when you're mean to me. A true friend, every season of life, every situation, regardless of conduct or action, even during difficult times. Now, who modeled that friendship? Jesus. Jesus did. I mean, what a friend to walk up to a leper and touch him. And you've probably been in church long enough to know that being a leper was social disaster. They had leper colonies where they made the lepers stay outside of town. And if they had to come into town, they had to walk through town declaring, unclean, unclean. That was a sign for people that there was something wrong with them. It's like when y'all wear Georgia Bulldog shirts. It's a sign that, hey, something's wrong with you, right? I knew that was coming. But there's stories where Jesus looked past that, and he walked up and he put his hands on them and he touched them and he healed that leprosy. That's love at all times. Listen, if we're going to be true biblical friends, we're going to have to get in the mess of people's lives. You cannot live a nice, tidy, sanitary life if you're going to be a true friend. I can just tell you as a pastor, I mean, I found myself in some messes. I never forget my first church. I was a young pastor and I was learning. I was more ignorant then than I am now, but I'm still learning. And this lady, they had visited our church, and she called me, and they're having terrible problems with her teenage daughter. So she asked me to come over, and I got there, and they're all standing out in the driveway fighting. The mom and dad fighting with the daughter. The boyfriend had come. She wanted to leave with him. They were fighting, and I said, well, hey, let's just go into the house, and let's sit down, try to calmly talk about this. Here I am. I'm 29. My kids are like 2 and 4. It kind of reminded me of a preacher one time said when he first started ministry, he was single and didn't have kids, and he had 20 great messages on marriage and raising kids. He said, when I got married and had kids, I threw every one of those away because I knew I didn't know what I was talking about. So I'm sitting there, man, how in the world do I... And so the mom and dad just start lambasting this daughter for her behavior. And all of a sudden the daughter comes out with this. She says, Mom and Dad, y'all... And she declared a certain behavior that they had going on in their marriage. It was very unbiblical. And I'm like, I just need to pray for y'all and leave. But if you're going to be a true friend, listen, it's going to be messy. We're going to have to get our hands and feet dirty. I mean, Jesus, the holy God, stepping into this world. Think about that. How messy that was. I laugh. Years ago, the first house me and Melissa bought, the sinks and everything stopped draining, and we had called a septic tank guy to come. I'd found the septic tank and it was just solid all the time. The septic tank guy from up in the mountains came down to pump it out. And I'll never forget this image. He was country. He's standing there with flip-flops on, shorts, no shirt, eating his lunch in his hand. And he's shoving that thing in and out of the septic tank, pumping it. That stuff's splattering. He's just sitting there, old Bubba, and that disgusted me. But think about when the holy God stepped out of heaven into this world full of sin. With His pure hands and His pure feet and His pure heart. And if Jesus was willing to do that, listen, to be a true friend, we're going to have to not insulate ourselves from the messiness of people's lives. We're going to have to love them in it and through it. And maybe some of you tonight can think about a time when there was something tough and bad in your life, and you had someone just sit there. You had someone come and just hold your hand. And I'll tell you, one thing I found out as a pastor, being present is a lot more than what I can ever say. Sometimes they just need somebody to sit and hold their hand and hug them and not say a word. In fact, I've been at the funeral home a lot of times, and there's sometimes I hear people say things I wish they just hadn't said. It's crazy the things people say when you have a loved one pass. So a true biblical friend that lives by wisdom. Now remember what we talked about last week. Wisdom, what it does, it causes us to submit our life under the authority of God. And so if we're going to be a wise biblical friend, what we're really doing is submitting ourselves under God, really to do what Paul said in 2 Corinthians, to be an ambassador of Jesus to other people. Jesus came as a friend of sinners. What does Jesus need for us to do? To be a friend of sinners. To be a friend of broken people and hurting people. To not be a fair weather friend, or listen, not to be a fair weather church. One thing I found, I went the other Saturday to Peanut Butter and Jesus. Listen, they go into some hard parts of this town. I mean, if you hadn't ridden around parts of Tifton, we rode by places and I thought, my gosh, nobody in America should have to live in a house like that. And you see these little kids come running out of these houses that don't even have windows, and they come running out to get a peanut butter sandwich. And listen, let me encourage you, if you've never done that, go to Peanut Butter and Jesus on a Saturday morning. Take your grandkids, make those sandwiches, go out. I said, every young person ought to come see this. to realize there are people that don't get to live like us. And it was great for me to go and do, just to get out of my sanitary little world. Those people need the church to be friends of them. And so it's based on love and it's consistent. So look at the benefits wisdom says of this true kind of friendship. Number one, or A, friendships like this help one another grow and mature. Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron and one person sharpens another. The way I think about this, you ever see those chefs take that metal rod and they'll take a knife and they'll, you know, it takes pressure together, which pressure is proximity. The closer something gets, the more pressure it has, right? It takes friction. It's got to be rubbing against another, and it takes a little bit of heat. Now think about that. When two objects are pressed together, they hone each other. They rub off the rough edges. They make one another sharper. And is a dull knife useful? Does a dull knife cut? Is a dull Christian useful for the kingdom? A sharp Christian, a spiritual Christian is useful for the kingdom. And so we use the word discipleship. Discipleship is what this really speaks of. When two people or three people, I've got a couple of groups of men I meet with. I meet with two guys on Wednesday morning, Buddy Morris and Seth Harrison. Seth's in his late 20s, Buddy's in his early 60s. And there I am in the middle, 35. And come on, Paul. You don't believe that? But Seth made a statement this morning. He said, I love this time together. Because you know what we're doing? We're iron sharpening iron. We just started reading a book called, that book I shared with y'all, How to Give Away Your Faith. And we're sitting there and we're talking about those ideas. And we're learning from each other. We're saying, hey, this is where I'm challenged to evangelize. And we're being encouraged and prayed for. Hey, let me just say to you men in here, if you don't have anything going on Wednesday morning, 6:30 Hog and Bones, we're Baptists. We eat when we study the Bible. I want to invite some of you men, if you want to come join us, learn how to give away your faith. I'd love to have you do that. I need that. I need men in my life that are going to get close enough to me to not only encourage me, I need men to get close enough to my life to see my faults, to say, hey, don't be dumb. I need men like that. We all need people like that in our life. Discipleship really is the process of assisting one another to grow spiritually. And here's the two things you got to have. Time. You got to make time for other people. And proximity. You got to have closeness. I'm so proud of my wife. She meets with some young ladies at our house on Wednesday night after church. And they'll meet till 9:30. It's some ladies that have graduated from school. Some ladies are in college. And two of those young ladies came and sat with her Sunday morning. And pray for them as their relationship grows. But you know, it's just time. She's spending time and proximity with them. If you want Jesus to use your life and your friendships to make a spiritual difference, let me encourage you to do this. Find 2 or 3 people that you can get together with for an hour a week. Pick a book of the Bible or whatever, but just time and proximity. Bounce that ideas off each other. And listen, men especially, we need a couple of men in our life who will not be afraid to get in our face and call us out. And that's the second thing. Biblical friendship. Let me make one more statement. Biblical friendships will always help us grow closer to Christ and not further from Christ. Now, I believe as Christians we need 2 types of friendships. We need people that are helping us grow, but we also need friendships with people that we are drawing toward Christ. And sometimes that's going to be lost people. But let me encourage you, be very careful about that. Make sure that you're at a place in your Christian life where you can bring them closer to Christ and not be brought down. A second thing is great biblical friends in wisdom hold us accountable and correct us out of love. I love this verse, Proverbs 27:6. The wounds of a friend are trustworthy, but the kisses of an enemy are excessive. Listen, if somebody's always telling you what you want to hear, they might not be the best friend you need. Many years ago, I had a pastor growing up, just a great man. He was my pastor from the time I was about 10 to when I got in college. I was called in ministry under him, but I never will forget, I was probably 18, 19, had graduated high school, and I tell people I ain't always been a preacher, okay? And, I'd go to church on Sunday morning. I wouldn't go much on Sunday night. I wasn't as involved in things that I need to be. And when I'd go on Sunday morning, I'd kind of sit in the back. Occasionally, I'd come in on Sunday night. And so one Sunday night at church, I sit in the back, and I know it's small sanctuary. Sanctuary is probably about as big as this room. And I know I wasn't paying attention like I should. And this man loved me. And after church, he'd come up to me, and he said, I want to talk to you. And he pretty much just got on to me. You ain't, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing and stuff. And I thought, well, you ain't my daddy. I got mad. I got mad. Who's he? I'm 19 years old. Who's this man to tell me? But you know what? That stuck with me. I walked away mad, but I walked away convicted. And I look back now, I'm thankful for that. That he loved me enough to stab me with that hot poker and say, hey, you need to straighten up. Listen, sometimes the best friends are the friends that will cut you to heal you. And that's what that says. And if you got somebody just always telling you what you want to hear, they're not your friend. True friends will not hold the truth from us even when it hurts. I love this story. We won't turn back. Galatians chapter 2. I love this story. Peter and Paul, I think, had a close friendship in ministry. But this story in Galatians 2, what happened was Paul had come to Galatia, and there was still a little bit of controversy of if you were going to put your faith in Jesus, did you still need to follow the Jewish law? Did you need to be circumcised and all that stuff? Well, what happened, Peter was a very devout Jew when he got saved. And what would happen was, because of social pressure, Peter would hang out with and associate with the non-Jewish people, except when church leaders from Jerusalem came, he would act like, oh, I don't hang out with them people. He wanted to make himself look good to Jewish leaders. And Paul actually says, I got up in his face. He says in those verses, I confronted Peter to his face in front of others because he was being a hypocrite and pretending to be a friend of those non-Jews until the Jews came around. And it was even so bad, Paul says, Peter's hypocrisy was so bad, he was leading Barnabas and others to do the same thing. Paul loved Peter so much, and he loved the gospel so much. And let me say this. It's not only love for other people by which we ought to be willing to get in their face and hold them accountable, especially brothers in Christ for the way they're living. But when we love Jesus and we love the gospel, if I see another brother in Christ that's out there doing something that's confusing people about what Christianity and the gospel is, I'm not only helping them, I'm protecting the beauty of the gospel. I'm loving Jesus. I mean, there's sometimes people need to be called out because we're in here preaching the gospel and they're out there confusing people about what being a Christian is. I've known some people, I want to say, look, if you're going to live like that, please don't go out here and tell people you're a member of Northside Baptist Church. And please don't tell them you're a Christian, because you're making Jesus and us look bad. I love a story about Alexander the Great. One time, there was a soldier who was known to be kind of a troublemaker and rabble-rouser and drunk and all that. He was a part of the army, and he shared the same name as Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great found out about it, and he said, bring that young man here. And brought him before Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great said, listen, young man, you either change your name or change your ways. He didn't want people being confused with him. And I think Jesus would say that to a lot of us sometimes. Hey, you ever thought about what it means when we call ourselves a Christian? We are taking the name of Jesus, and we're representing that. And that convicts me that if I go out here and tell people I'm a Christian, listen, if I go out here and tell people I'm the pastor of Northside Baptist Church, and then I go out here and act a fool, that looks bad on the church, But it looks worse when I go out here and say I'm a Christian and I'm doing stuff and people are associating me with Christ. And so, true biblical friendship, we hold one another accountable. Galatians 6, 1 and 2, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, that means if you're breaking the rules, you're stepping over the line, you're sinning, you who are spiritual should what? Restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Now, I don't mean I don't go to Dickie and say, Dickie, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to take you out behind the woodshed and, and all this. But, I come to Dickie and say, Dickie, as a Christian, I really want to encourage you to think about how you're living. How is this affecting you? And you love that person. And he says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. He says, keep watch on yourself lest you too be tempted. There's a certain positive about lovingly helping other people walk with Christ. It kind of protects you, right? And that don't mean that I hold all of you under a microscope and trying to find every little thing you do. But it does mean if I'm watching out for you and your spiritual life, and I'm making sure that you're not walking a path that's going to destroy you, it makes me walk a little closer, a little more careful. I think about when I had little kids, the girls were little, and we'd be hiking or something. I would watch my step because I was watching their step, because they were following me. My wife's going to kill me for telling this story. We were in St. Augustine at that national state park, that state park out there, and we were walking down through the marsh and stuff, and it was kind of woody. And she was walking in front of us, and the girls were between us, and I was back here, and I took up a big old piece of log I found, and she's walking, and I threw it over in the woods beside her, and she must have thought it was an alligator, because she turned around and she run right past the girls. Run right past me. I said, well, we know who you were preserving. But here's the thing. If we'll watch out for one another, we'll watch out for ourselves a lot better. And so y'all don't tell her, well, I guess this is going to be on YouTube now, so I guess you'll find out anyway. So here's a third benefit of this biblical friendship. We add comfort and joy to one another's lives. You ever had one of those friends that you knew when you got around them, no matter what kind of day you were having, they were going to make your day better? Right? And the kind of friend that you thought, man, if I could just call so-and-so, hear their voice or whatever. Proverbs 27:9, oil and incense bring joy to the heart, and the sweetness of a friend is better than self-counsel. Now, in the Old Testament, oil and incense were very important. They would use olive oil for healing. It was like old-timey Vicks salve. I mean, that stuff will fix anything, right? When I was a kid, I'd get a sinus headache. My mom would rub that stuff on my chest and on my head. I was kidding with Mandy the other day up here in the office. She's been like everybody else, coughing, and she hadn't had much of a voice. I had a guy that used to be a member of my church that grew up in the country. He said when he got sick, what his mama's remedy was, she would make him eat a spoon of Vicks salve. Has anybody in here ever eat Vicks salve? I mean, it says clearly on the bottle, do not eat this. But she would make him eat that Vicks salve. But in the old times, olive oil, they used it as a healing ointment, as medicine. They used it to light their homes. It was a valuable commodity. Incense was used. Back then, they didn't have Old Spice and all this stuff. So, you want to smell a little better, you grab your handful of incense and whatever. They would burn it in their homes, It was also a sign of as it burned, the smoke, fragrant, the fragrant smell going up to heaven. The Bible refers to our prayers, as that fragrance that pleases God. So look at that comparison there. That a biblical friend is somebody that brings healing to your life, that brings sweetness to your life, that makes things better, knows the right words to say, or what not to say, is there at the right time. They're Baptists. They bring a casserole when somebody's sick, Maybe if that had been written now, it'd say, a casserole and fried chicken bring joy to the heart. That's the Baptist version. But that's what a biblical friend looks for ways to be used by God to heal hurts, to bring joy to life. And so I've got this question here. How can we contribute to the comfort of people and joy to their lives? How can our words and our actions contribute? I want to brag on y'all, church. Dwight's son-in-law, Chris, he come up to me at the funeral today. He said, Stacy, I know you know this, but you have a tremendous church. And Chris and them live down in Jacksonville, but just seeing the way you have cared for Dwight and Jan, I said, I know. I said, they do it for everybody. Seeing the way y'all have cared for me and Melissa. Listen, there's sometimes I don't know if God called me here as much for y'all as He did for y'all for us during this time we've been through in the last year and a half. The way y'all have loved us, I mean, it is invaluable. You know, now here's what ought to break our heart. That 92.5% of people that aren't in a Baptist church on Sunday, that do not have a church family, that's one of the most vital things I believe they're missing in their life. They're missing friends that care. Now, I'm sure some of them still have friends and family, but biblical friendships that truly, truly care. And we all know how valuable those, and you know, I think the greatest of those friendships really just remind us of Jesus and help us know Him more. And so I just leave with this question: how can we begin and cultivate biblical friendships? Let me encourage you to think about this week, to live and say, you know, God, how can I be wise in my friendships? It may be at your place of work where you need to be thinking about how you can build a biblical friendship with lost people just to show them Jesus and draw them to Jesus. Maybe there's some broken friendships you have that you know, God's speaking to you about going and mending that. A soft word, the Bible says, turns away wrath. You know, I would hate to think that I lived my life and only 3 or 4 people could say he was the kind of friend of me that the Bible says. Man, you know, people might not be that kind of friend to me that much. I would say I have more than 5 of those friends. But aren't we called to be that friend? And again, going back to that whole evangelism comment a minute ago earlier at the beginning, I believe it's friendships like that that's going to win the lost world when we can really show them Jesus. So, hey, thank y'all. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Look forward to seeing you Sunday.